This is Brent Ellis, president of Spring Arbor University, and you're listening to Success is a Choice with Jamy Bechler.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. Today, we are very excited to have Rob Miller. Rob Miller is the commissioner of the Wolverine-Hoosier Athletic Conference, which includes colleges from Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. He is also a staff member and speaker with Proactive Coaching, one of the top leadership training companies in the nation. Rob, thanks for being with us today.
It's awesome to join you. Glad to be here.
You have quite an experience in the sports field. Coach, athletic director, commissioner, motivational speaker, leadership trainer. Tell us a little bit about your experiences and your background for those that don't know you quite as well.
Sure, glad to do that. It means I'm getting old is what it means when you go through all those things. But, I grew up in a small town in Michigan where I had a chance to play 4 sports and have some great coaches. Went on to Spring Arbor College. It's university now, but it was college at the time, and I just played basketball there. And when I graduated from there, they immediately took me on, and I coached for 6 years there, and did some of that. Was an assistant athletic director, but they let me get involved in everything, and that really jump-started my career, made me understand small college athletics. But then I had another opportunity right after that, where I went to Michigan State and spent 3 years where I was working in getting my master's in athletic administration, and I internshiped inside what was called the Ralph Young Fund, their fundraising department. And that gave me the whole look at Division I athletics. And I think in that short time frame of 10 years when I first started my career, I saw the whole gamut of intercollegiate athletics. And that really, I think, helped me understand the differences and the similarities, because there's a lot of similarities between the two, and there's some huge differences between the two. And then after that, got into national administration at the National Christian College Athletic Association and also the NAIA, and that's where I spent 8 years and was part of the founding of Champions of Character program, where I met my partner, Bruce Brown, and we worked together for 8 years at the NAIA on character development and education of coaches and athletes. And then that moved into us being partners with Proactive Coaching for the last 10 years, speaking at high schools, colleges, and professional teams, and mostly in the United States, but actually all across the world, as I'm going to Vietnam here in a little bit to speak. So it's been a fun ride.
When you were at the NAIA, you were instrumental in the Champions of Character program. Talk us a little bit through that. A lot of our audience is familiar with the Champions of Character program and the NAIA, but for those of us that aren't, talk us through that. What is that program, and what were the origins of it?
Well, the origins of it, I think I can speak to pretty strongly. I was hired by our then CEO, Steve Baker, who was really looking back. This is in 2000 at the culture of sport. And, have we dented it a little bit? I'm not sure we've dented it much in 15 years, but I think we've made some huge progress on a team-by-team, school-by-school basis, not necessarily a media basis. But it comes back to the culture of saying, there's a lot of things going on that are in the negative, but where can we make the positive? And the one thing we did with the Champions of Character program in 2000 when we launched it inside that group of 300 colleges and universities is, when I took the program, they handed it to me. I brought in a lot of people from the membership that I knew were strong in this, mostly coaches, ADs, but some college presidents as well. But then we found Bruce. And the thing about Bruce that set him apart from a lot of other people I was hearing was everybody was talking at the philosophical level. And Jamy, you're a coach. We don't live in a philosophical world. We live in an application world. Now, we all need strong philosophies. We need those. But in actuality, as a coach, I want to know what I can do tomorrow in practice that can help my team advance in culture and everything else to get us better. That's where Bruce stepped in, and his message was really strong in that application model. How do you teach character? Sport does not teach character. It doesn't. Coaches who intentionally teach character. And so that's how they got started. Now, over the last number of years. That's 2000, so we're 16, 17 years in. I think the program's gone a little bit different direction, which is fine, more into now a community service model and things like that are really driving our kids to get engaged inside their communities at the NAIA level. So that's kind of the origins and where it's kind of come about now.
You mentioned Bruce Brown, who's your partner with Proactive Coaching. Talk about all the good that you do with Proactive Coaching. I know you have booklets. You go and speak to many schools all across the country. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing with Proactive Coaching.
Sure. Our founder, Bruce, as we've talked about, he was in the Seattle area for 35 years, coaching high school, college, both genders, 4 different sports. And then I'm in the Kansas City area, and we're the partners of it. And then we have about 3 or 4 other people that speak with us. And we go across the country speaking at high schools, colleges, pro teams, even some businesses anymore. We're doing some businesses as well. And what we're really focusing on is, okay, how do you develop that right culture? I'll use a phrase. I think we've become very good at T-shirt slogans in our society. Everybody has a slogan. Everybody has a banner statement. Everybody has, values. But do we know what they look like? We got to get away from T-shirt slogans and get into action statements. So I don't care if your team has a slogan, but what's that look like in the off season? What's that look like in the preseason? What's it look like in practice? What's it look like in game day? What's it look like in the community? What's it look like in the classroom? That's where we're taking this. And then we really work with leadership, because I think, you do too. I think both of us have similar passions when it comes to leadership. Because I think we hear a lot of the time we don't have any leaders anymore. And I step back from that. I love today's kids. I think they're so intelligent. I do agree we're lacking leaders, but I don't want to hear we don't have leaders anymore. The challenge back question is, what are you doing to create them? And we're helping, hopefully, helping coaches and administrators create the leaders they need to take their team to the next level. So we're about culture and leadership, and we speak about 200 days a year, I think, between all of us. I do most of that at about 120, I think 120, 125 days. And then it's just fun. We just have a fun time. I say I'm still coaching. I'm just coaching a different team every day. That's the nice thing about it.
And don't have to lose sleep over the losses.
That's true. That's true. It's kind of like when I went from assistant coach to head coach. The biggest difference is you sleep at night when you're the assistant coach. Kind of same thing here.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you see facing student athletes, and maybe the obstacles that they experience in being leaders?
Well, I think there's 2 obstacles our kids are facing in today's culture that they have to overcome to lead, and not necessarily that they have them, the culture has them. The first is social media. And I'm not against it. We have, professional Facebook pages that has 650,000 people. We've got a lot of, I have personal Facebook, so I'm not against social media. But I think the thing that we have to understand with social media is you don't lead through tweets, texts, and posts. You lead through personal relationships. And that can be positive personal relationships, and sometimes that means you have to confront somebody. And that has hindered us. There's kind of a wall there with social media. I'd rather text them, I'd rather post about them, I'd rather tweet them than look them in the eyes and say it. So that's one obstacle. The second obstacle is youth sport. And what I mean by that is we're starting at 3, 4, and 5 for kids in youth sport, and everything's adult controlled. When I was playing growing up, and many other people and that are listening to this podcast, we were playing at 3, 4, and 5 too, but it was at the park and the playground, and there's no adults around. The difference is there, when there's no adults around, you lead yourself, you organize yourself, you manage yourself. When adults are around, the adults lead, organize, and manage. Creativity, conflict resolution. We solved our own problems, or everybody packed up and went home. Today, problems are solved for kids. And so those are the 2 kind of obstacles I think they have to come over. Issues they face is, I think, in this culture, it's harder because we've become really good at the guilt trip. If I confront you, it's because you hate me. It's not because you're trying to get me better. Issues they face when they're dealing with leadership is so many people want the title of leader but don't want the responsibility that goes with the job. So it's a whole lot of culture, and we've got to really work with people to get them to that spot where they're comfortable with it. And some will never be comfortable with it, but they'll get better with it.
Billy Graham once said that a coach can impact more people in 1 year than most people can do in a lifetime. I would imagine your coaches, their legacy can be seen through you, since, in your various roles throughout the year, you have really impacted various student athletes, both directly and indirectly. How were you challenged and inspired by your coaches to be your best?
I've been blessed, because I hear a lot about, I got this coach, I got that coach, and it's kind of like those people you look back on. And I had 3 or 4 coaches in high school, and I had my college coach. And every one of them did something different for me that I think made me better. And my high school tennis coach was one that brought perspective to it. He wanted to win, but when we did lose, as long as we gave our best, there was perspective there. My junior varsity football and basketball coach challenged me one day when he looked at me as a sophomore and said, you're better than what you think you are. He says, now you just got to believe. My high school varsity basketball coach and football coach, who's the same guy, he taught me so much, not just he taught me fundamentals, but he taught me the game. He taught me to understand the bigger picture. And my college coach, he believed in me. I mean, I didn't deserve to play 100 college basketball games with my talent level, but he sure put me out there in spots I could succeed in. And, it's interesting you say that because my basketball coach in college, he and I are always in touch. He's one of, we're just constantly texting and calling and keeping in touch as most we can. But even my high school football coach, who I don't see very often, I don't talk to very often, I live far away from there. I was home visiting my mom and dad this last week, and I ran into his wife just up walking around town. And, my first thought was, tell Coach I said hi, and tell Coach every time I present, I think about him. Because those are the guys that took me to the next level.
When you talk about application, when you know that as a coach or when you just say that reinforces kind of why it is that we get into coaching. What would you say to coaches to help them remember their why or to remember the legacy that they're actually creating and the impact they're actually having?
I think first they got to look past it because especially young coaches, will get so caught up in that wins and losses. They get in that prove-it stage of coaching. And they need to get out of that and just think about this. I want to be really, really good at my sports skills. I got to be really good teaching the skills and the game. But what can I teach my kids that they'll live out in their life? Because some sports, tennis, golf, running, I can give them some sports skills they can live out in their life. Basketball, football, some of our skills, they're not going to do that much longer. But what can we teach them? And I think that keeps us on focus. And then I think the second thing that can keep you on focus for doing this is to understand if we really teach character and we define character as making good decisions on effort and behavior, if we have more people making good decisions on effort and behavior, we produce at a higher level. We produce at a higher level, we get better. We get better, we have a better chance to reach potential. And frankly, you got a better chance to reach potential, you have a better chance to be successful. And so kind of put that as in those two perspectives because in coaching, as you know, we can get distracted really quick.
Now, you deal with a lot of coaches and you deal with a lot of athletic directors in your current role as commissioner of the Wolverine-Hoosier Athletic Conference. Talk a little bit about your responsibilities as commissioner and how you're able to help develop them as leaders in that role.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting one because it's the commissioner's job versus my speaking job. The commissioner's job is the fireman. You're a fireman. You're putting fires out all the time. Because there's always issues, there's always things that come up, and you got conflict, and you got emotions, and you have all that. So I think the thing is to understand, I think the best thing is coaches and even as athletic administrators, we live in a highly emotional public world. Okay? Everything we do is for scrutiny. We're all one cell phone video away of just being done. So we have to understand how can we get our job done by being very professional. And that's the one thing the two things I really demand out of our coaches and our athletic directors in our conference is professionalism and communication. Don't leave things. Somebody emails you, you respond to that. You respond to that quickly. Sometimes you might not have the answer, but you're going to find the answer. You're going to get them the answer. I think if you build professionalism and positive communication, you build trust. And trust is the thing that will impact every team at every level in every organization forever is trust. And as long as you have trust, you can move forward with it. For me as a commissioner, I have to focus on the athletic directors. I got 220 head coaches in my conference, and so I'm not going to always be in touch with every one of those. But if I can be in contact with my athletic directors and we are able to send that same message throughout our conference, then that trickles down. Hopefully it's the top-down effect because that's where I sit because now we're sitting at 24 conference championships, which means we probably have somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 student athletes at our schools. So we have to do a really good job of funneling that down.
For those listeners that aren't aware of the NAIA conference, that is the Wolverine-Hoosier Athletic Conference, tell us a little bit about that. We mentioned that there's schools from Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. Tell us a little bit about that conference.
Well, let's get the first one out. We do have schools from Ohio, 2 of them. The conference name is Wolverine-Hoosier, and there's been numerous votes, but no one will allow the Buckeyes inside the name of the Wolverine-Hoosier Athletic Conference. So it's a joke we have, but there's some reality to that too as you kind of go through it. We feel very blessed. We have 12 members in our conference. We have 9 in Michigan, 1 in Indiana, 2 in Ohio, and those 3 schools outside of Michigan are all on the north side. So geographically, we're pretty close together. I think our farthest trip from the farthest point to the farthest point is like 3 hours and 15 minutes, which is unheard of in a college conference. We're really broad-based, and what I mean by that, our conference is very fortunate. I mentioned before we have 24 championships, which means we have our institutions sponsor a lot of sports. So we have the lacrosses and the bowlings and the competitive cheers are all. This will be our first year with men's ice hockey as a conference championship, and so we're really broad based, which allows us to provide opportunities for a lot of student athletes. I think we overall, our profile, we're 11 privates and 1 public. University of Michigan Dearborn is our public, but we all look pretty much alike. Somewhere probably on the low end of 1,000 students, and on the high end, Dearborn's 10,000. But overall, academically and athletically, we look alike, and so we feel really fortunate, and we're very competitive nationally, especially in the sports of track and field. Cross country, those seem to be our highlight sports, but we, in the last couple of years, have won national championships in soccer, both men and women, and also in the basketball arena for men. So we feel very fortunate where we are as a conference. Good people, great student athletes.
We'll get back to our interview with Rob Miller in just a minute, and it's obvious that he has a passion for helping student athletes to develop through his work with proactive coaching, being commissioner of the Wolverine-Hoosier Athletic Conference, and his work with the NAIA and the Champions of Character program. We share a passion helping student athletes develop their skills to become better leaders, teammates, and people. Now, we probably all know a youngster that plays sports, and we want them to excel as an athlete, but we also want them to develop the skills to be productive members of society. Frederick Douglass once said it's easier to build up strong children than it is to repair broken men. You know, when we help develop students, we are also helping to influence the future in a positive way. Well, I wrote a book entitled The Leadership Playbook, Become Your Team's Most Valuable Leader. It's packed full of insightful stories and practical tips for student athletes. You can find out more at theleadershipplaybook.com. And now back to this awesome interview with Rob Miller. When people turn on TV, they're inundated on ESPN or Fox with the story of big business and sports and schools changing conferences and all the money and amateurism and all that kind of stuff. Do you have issues like that in your conference, or is that kind of isolated and you don't experience anything about that?
Well, we have financial issues. They're probably just on the opposite end. And what I mean by that is well, I'd say the thing we're all dealing with, I don't care if you're D1, I don't care if you're what division you are, we're all dealing with branding issues and marketing issues, get to be known, have that own rivalry. People know who we are in our own community. So we deal with that. We're all big business. The difference is those Division Ones are fighting for marketing and sponsorship dollars to survive, where in most of our cases, our kids are getting some scholarships, but they're not full rides. And so a lot of athletics, and why we have broad-based athletics, is that brings enrollment. And, you know, the student athlete may not be paying the full freight, but they may be paying 40, 50, 60%. And that obviously comes to the college, which helps the college run the chemistry department and run everything else that needs to be run. And so it is a big business. And in this world, especially at the small college, but you're seeing it at large college, we have less students coming out of high school heading to college than we've had in a long time in our nation, and everybody's fighting for those same students. And so it is a business right now, because if you don't get, there's projections we'll lose 10% of all colleges in the next 10 to 20 years because they're not going to be able to get the enrollment in to sustain themselves. So that's some of the issues from the big business side that filter down to athletics, which means, you know what, you're carrying that varsity basketball team of 12 kids, but you better add a JV team with 12 kids too, because, that allows us to have more enrollment. For us, then, we have to turn that into opportunity for student athletes and a good student athlete experience. That's where it all kind of funnels for us.
You have enjoyed quite a illustrious and successful career in a lot of different areas, as we talked about: administration, coaching, public speaking, being a commissioner. What are some of the things that, as you look back, really stand out to you that are kind of highlights that maybe you're the most proud of?
I think when I look back, the things I'm most proud of is when I hear from one of my former student athletes. I just two that I'm thinking. One's a young man. We basically got off the streets of near Flint, Michigan, and he came into our program and he played for a couple of years, got injured, so he didn't finish playing basketball, but he got his degree, and he's been a police officer now for about 20 years in this town in Michigan. And he wrote a note the other day just talking about, if it wouldn't have been for basketball, wouldn't have been for Coach Miller recruiting me, I don't think I would be where I am with my family and my career. In fact, I know I wouldn't be. I'd probably be dead. Well, I have another student athlete that a lot of people didn't look at him and think he'd be successful, and he's the principal of one of the largest high schools in the state of Michigan right now, and he came out of a tough background. Those are my athletes are the things I'm most proud of, or coaches that I had a chance to help along the way who are finding success, and those I think are the legacies in your life. And you stay around business long enough, I don't care what it is, you're going to get awards, you're going to get accolades just because you're there for 20, 30, 40 years. But it's the people you leave behind that to me are the things that make my day.
Have there been some things you wish you had done differently, or mistakes you've made along the way that maybe you learned from, or that you've seen others make that you would love to mention?
Every day I make mistakes. I think anybody sits back and says, this is easy. I don't know what you're doing because I'd like to figure it out. I think early in my career, I wish I would have really focused on more mentoring. I think I wish I would have had not just, I think I would have been more willing to walk into people's offices, sit down and say, what's your opinion of this? What do you think? Not that I'd always take it, but I think I needed to listen more when I was younger. Probably through the middle of my career, I think I probably should have read more, because towards the end of my career now, I can't stop reading. I just love reading and just getting into things. And I'm traveling more and I'm on airplanes. I think that maybe leads to it because you have a lot of dead time. But saying that, I'm just soaking up so much more. I wish I would have done that more in the middle of my career. And then I think at the end here, as I'm kind of going through, and I got 10, 15 more years left, I would hope. But you haven't been in it 30 years now. I do believe right now, I think what every day I want to get to is, I need to see I don't even know how to phrase it more or less. I've become to a point I got to remember where I was 30 years ago when that young impatient coach is talking to me, and I'm looking and go, why don't you get it? And then think back 30 years ago, you didn't get it either. You didn't have a clue 30 years ago. And I think patience would be probably the thing I really every day I need to have more now. The one thing I think I did right, and I know this isn't the question, it was the last one, but I think one thing, if everybody would step back and don't be in a hurry. I think what I did in the speaking profession was probably, for me, the most successful thing I could do. When I hired Bruce at the NAIA, and he came in and worked with us, and Steve and Jim Carr, people at the NAIA, helped hire him. When we were speaking, I didn't say, I want to do this. Let me do this right now. I sat back and I watched an expert do it for over 2 years before I gave my first one. And I studied that, and I listened to it. And I didn't want to be a mimic of his, but I wanted to understand why is he so successful. And I think too many times in our culture today, we want to try to be successful tomorrow, where if we step back and we let the process play out, we'll be far more successful in 10 years than if we try to be everything tomorrow.
You mentioned that you like to read books now, especially when you're on airplanes. What are some books or even podcasts? What are some of those that you would definitely recommend or that you're reading now?
Well, I'll tell you the 2 books I'm reading right now that I have right here on my desk ready to go on my trip this afternoon. I got this book called The Book of Mysteries, which is actually a fun little book. It's based on biblical issues in the Bible where you just learn things that I never had learned before. And I've read the Bible and all that, and faith-based. And this book it's really fun because I learn something new every time I read it. So that's always fun. This other book I have that I'm reading, I'm halfway through, is called The Leadership Playbook. Have you read of it? Heard of it? Written by yourself. And I find this to be a really good book. You've really done a good job of bringing a lot of people's points together and really solidifying some just key thoughts when it comes to leadership. And those are the two that I have right now I'm really, really enjoying. Saying that, there are some standbys, that I think are always good for coaches to read. Anything by John Wooden, and, it's sad, but, a lot of our kids do not know who John Wooden is, and a lot of our young coaches don't know who he is. And I think anytime I can offer up those books to young coaches, they call me coach. Go get me Wooden on Leadership. Those are great books. The Tony Dungy books are great books to read. And then, of course, I think Bruce Brown, my partner, has written some of the best books on culture and sport you can find, out there as well. So that's what I'm reading, and those are the things that I think have helped me the most as I'm going kind of through my career. And then, of course, anything for me, it all comes back biblically for me to begin with. So,
well, we will put those books in the show notes so people can check those out as well. And you mentioned John Wooden. I think it's crucial now, as much as it's ever been, for coaches to know who John Wooden is and how he coached, because so many times, and I'm sure you hear it out there, Rob, kids these days, or, people just talk bad about this generation, and they forget John Wooden was coaching during the Vietnam War era, which was as bad as any generation, or as many challenges presented to coaches in terms of protesting and the attitude of the day. And he was able to make relationships and make connections with people that were protesting every day, or that had opinions different than his. So seeing how he coached, I think, could actually help a lot of coaches today.
Oh, I agree, and I think we've had those people all throughout our history, whether it be John Wooden, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll. We've got some of these unbelievable coaches through history. And the problem is we lose that, and we can lose it pretty quick. Last week I'm up in the Minnesota airport, and I'm flying back here to Kansas City, and it's late one evening, and I'm walking down the terminal to my flight, and I look over to a flight that's going up to Bozeman, Montana, and there's Coach Bob Knight. And he's sitting there. He's probably heading up fly fishing or something like that. There's a few people taking pictures with him, and they're looking over and go, who are they making the fuss about? Who is that guy? And, you think about that. 10 years ago, everybody would have said, hey, there's Coach Bob Knight. 10 years later, it's like half the group doesn't know who he is already, because those kids, if you think about it, were 10, 11, 12 years old when Coach Knight quit coaching. And so it doesn't take long for us to forget about some of the great influences like Coach Wooden, like Coach Landry, like Coach whoever it is in your past. And we got to keep those things alive. And you may not keep their name alive, but keep what the tools they taught alive, because that's the key if we're going to impact the next generation.
Yeah, you can learn from those people, and especially if they've gone through similar situations as what you're experiencing right now. If you've got tough parents, then find some coaches that have dealt with tough parents. Whatever it is, figure out who can help you and where you can draw some inspiration, because people have done it. People have gone through challenges just like you have.
Well, and I think a lot of times one of the challenges I think we're fighting at high school, Jamie, is it used to be, okay, you and I'd be coaching at the same high school. One, we were teachers there. That's the old days, okay, not good or bad, but we were teaching there. So we knew all those kids. Second is we were multi-sport coaches. Now I may be the head coach of one and I may be the assistant coach of another, but we saw the different issues. Now we have a lot of coaches coming in from the outside, so they're not there all day. When they show up at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're there to practice, and they need their time to practice. But they don't understand what's going on in that school all day and what may be happening to that kid in algebra class, or what's going on over here. And then most of our coaches aren't doing multiple sports. They're doing one sport. And so they're over on this island, and they don't realize that coach over there is dealing with the same issue. And that's why I tell coaches, sit down and talk with them, and you're going to find out at the same schools, you're dealing with the same issues. Deal with them together, because when coaches and teachers work together, good things happen. When coaches, teachers, and parents work together, miracles happen.
Is there a quote or a favorite quote you have, or a mantra that you abide by?
Well, My favorite quote of all time, it comes from Shawshank Redemption, and that movie, it's hysterical. My wife laughs at me. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but if I'm running through the channels and Shawshank's on, I'll watch it again for the 5 millionth time. I just love that movie. But the quote in there that I've always kind of lived by is get busy living or get busy dying. And every day I want to get up and I want to live, and I want to just make sure we're making an impact on what we're trying to do, and we do it to the best of our ability.
Who would be someone that you would want to meet along your travels or get to know that you haven't done already?
Well, there's a ton, there's all the famous names out there, but, one person, he's gone from us now, but I would have loved to sit down and talk to him, was Frosty Westering, the great football coach up in the Pacific Northwest. He would have been one I never really got a chance to spend any time with, but I would have loved to, because what a culture keeper he was and the things he got done. And he's got a great book called The Big Time Is Where You're At. And so, that's huge. That's one person I would have loved to meet. I'm not that big into names, but every time I meet somebody, I don't care who it is, I just hope to draw something from them that they could tell me a little bit about what makes them better, which makes us better. And so I'm not sure there's one particular person at all. I just like to learn from anybody I get a chance to meet.
What is maybe your main trait or a strength of yours that's allowed you to have as much success as you've had, that's kind of gotten you through the years?
Those are always tough questions for me, because I don't know. Ask my wife. That's how I feel about those questions.
Well, we'll ask her about the weaknesses. She's on the next episode about the weaknesses, yeah.
She could go on for 3 or 4 podcasts for you. I think communication. I think that's probably it. My goal is I want to communicate. You're not going to have a text message. You're not going to have an email. You're not going to have a phone call that lasts very long without me responding to it. So I got it. I'm dealing with it. We'll take care of it, or you get my response. Those things I think have been my best forte moving forward, is people know I'm going to respond. And that, I think, they may not like the response, but they know they're going to get it.
You do so much with being a commissioner, but you also do a lot with leadership training and speaking. How do you, as you mentioned, over 100 speaking engagements you do per year. How do you kind of balance that? Obviously, it's possible to have multiple roles and responsibilities, but how do you balance that? How are you able to handle both of those successfully?
Well, I think there's about maybe 3 things. One is you're accessible. No matter where you are, you're accessible, be that email or phone call. I'll take your call. I could be speaking on the West Coast, but I could be speaking to my conference back in Michigan, in Indiana, Ohio. I'm there for you. So if you that's number one, be accessible. The second thing is plan it out. And what I mean is I know there's certain times of the year that I'm not going to be speaking because I have to be back in Michigan. Those are my priorities, to be at championships, to be at meetings. And those are just, they're already blocked out of my schedule a year in advance, so I don't get myself into too many, I got to go here, I got to go here, I got to make a decision. No, I got to be well planned out. And for me, it's about a year in advance. I got to have things into the calendar. The third thing, I think, is just be open. And what I mean by open is when I talk to my ADs, it's like, hey, I'm going to be gone this, and this. You can reach me. I'll be accessible to you, but understand I'm not going to be here in the area to take care of that. And I'd say the last thing is be honest. And what I mean by honesty is this. I've told my conference when we look at things, when you have these objectives, I can do these by being remote and mobile and all those. If you change your objectives and they move into another category, those are things that I probably won't be able to do being remote and mobile. And I just want to be honest with you. When that time comes, I'll probably need to move on, or you're going to have to ask me to move on, because those won't fit into what I'm trying to do here. And so I think those things help out to try to balance what you're trying to do. And then added your family time, and you better make sure you have time for your family. And I'll give you a great example. Last night I got home late Tuesday night. It was probably midnight when I walked in and got to bed. And yesterday was a full day of catching up with paperwork and conference issues. And my wife comes home and she says, our Bible study group's going to a movie. The last thing I wanted to do is pick up and go to that movie last night. I wanted to sit down and watch the wild card game. That's what I wanted to do. And I said, okay, let's go. And, I realized after 2.5 hours of that movie, it was probably one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. And I so enjoyed that chance to get out. make the time to make sure you take that time, even when you're tired, to be with your family, to be with your priorities in life.
Where can people connect with you or learn more about you, your conference, your services, if they want to explore that further?
The two things, proactive coaching, you can just go to proactivecoaching.info. That's proactivecoaching.info, which is a different one. And that has kind of our website and what we do. Our Facebook page, if you search for Proactive Coaching LLC on Facebook, that's one that has a lot of interaction, a lot of our quotes, a lot of what we do is on there as well. So that's the proactive coaching. You go to Wolverine-Hoosier, WHAC.net. That is our website for our conference, WHC.net. If they want to learn about our conference, or anybody can just email me. And the best way to email me is rob@proactivecoaching.info. That is rob@proactivecoaching.info. And that's the best way to just get a hold of me. And you'll find out I'll respond in 24 hours.
Excellent. We will put that in the show notes so people can check that out and get in contact with you and see all the great things that you're doing. Or bring you guys in. Bring you in for a speaking engagement to add value to your student athletes or coaches. Rob, I really appreciate your time today. Great insights, and I know your time is precious, so thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jamie.